You're all excited about moving to Myrtle Beach, but there are some things you need to know before you make that move. Today, we're going to discuss the things that nobody warned you about before making the move to Myrtle Beach. Let's get started. What's happening, guys? It's Jeremy Blanton with RE/MAX Southern Shores, and today we're going to discuss some of the things about this area that nobody really talks about, things that nobody really warns anyone about before you go and make the move. You know, a lot of us, we've visited Myrtle Beach for many, many years, or we've done a research and seen that it's one of the top destinations across the country for people to move. And so you've all on board to go here. You're excited to get down here to the Grand Strand and live at the beach, live the good life. But before you go and put the pen to paper and purchase that property down here, you might want to take a couple minutes and watch this whole video. Now, guys, I'm going to discuss some of the things that are some of the most frustrating things about living here, things that clients of mine have told me really bother them about living in the Myrtle Beach area, and some other good stuff. So make sure you watch this video all the way to the end. And if there's something that I forget while I'm going through this video, do me a favor, drop a comment down below, let me know, and we'll definitely add it into next upcoming videos. So now that we kind of discussed what we're going to be talking about, let's jump into this. And the first thing that I want to discuss is the summer traffic here in Myrtle Beach. We're coming right now out of the winter season. We're living at the beach is pretty calm and quiet. You know, we can get into restaurants pretty quick and easy. We can get from one end of the beach to the other really fast, and there's not a lot of traffic in the area. But spring break is right around the corner. It's coming any day now, and with spring break starts the summer traffic and the higher amounts of tourists in the area. And with it, that means that times getting around on certain roads are going to start to go up exponentially. First off, 501. Get ready. It's coming. The time's coming real soon where once Memorial Day hits, that on the weekends, that road can become almost like a parking lot at times. You know, I remember back in the days when I would go to school at Coastal Carolina University, go Chanticleers, and I would live up in the northern end of the beach. And when I would leave for class, I would sometimes have to leave, especially as we're getting now out of spring break. I'd have to leave 2 to 3 hours beforehand. Now, luckily, we have new roads that have come into the area, and it's made that travel time go down exponentially. But if there is a wreck that happens on Highway 17 or on 501, there is a good possibility that you could be stuck in certain segments of the beach where you can't move for 20, 30, 40 minutes at a time. I remember one time I was on my way home from college, and there was a manufactured home that was coming down 501 right before the Carolina Forest area. And this is also before Highway 31 was around. And, you know, Carolina Forest Boulevard wasn't really around yet either. And a manufactured home that was on the back of a trailer basically jackknifed and laid across 501. When this happened, there was no place for me to turn around. There was no alternate roads for me to take to get to where I needed to be. I had to go through this traffic. I remember sitting there with other people. We literally turned all our cars off, got out of the car, and we had just a conversation and hung out in the middle of 501 for about an hour and a half while the crews came and cleaned up the mess so that we could continue on with traffic. Now, as we start to get into summertime, the traffic builds up on that road because 501 is basically the main thoroughfare that brings most people into the area that are coming down for vacation, especially if they're coming and they're bringing along with them their RV or camper. They're going down 501 till they can meet with 544 and heading down to Surfside Beach because that's where most of our areas for people with RVs are going. But anyone else who's coming to the beach on vacation and staying at one of the hundreds of hotels, they have to take 501 to at least get to an element where they can veer off and take other parts of the beach. So what does this mean? Well, on Fridays, that's the big day when everybody's coming into town because everybody gets off work and they start heading to the beach. And what does that mean on Sundays? That means that's also the time when a lot of people are leaving. So if you're needing to head out, you could get stuck in this traffic. You could end up sitting an extra 20 to 30 minutes. Now, if you're a local, you know the areas to avoid and you learn the times not to go on these roads. So you start to plan differently. If I need to go grocery shopping over at Sam's Club or go to BJ's, I'm not going to try to do that on a Friday or a Friday afternoon. I'm also probably not going to do it on a Saturday or Sunday. Instead, I'm going to plan differently. I'm going to go do those maybe on a Tuesday morning or on a Wednesday afternoon, something like that, where it's not going to be a big of a difference. If you take the time to plan ahead and put a little bit of thought into it and a little bit bit of effort, you will not really deal with a lot of these traffic issues. But traffic is something you definitely want to pay attention to when you're moving to the area, especially as the season comes into existence. The second thing that you want to take into consideration is the insurance. And insurance can really surprise you. You know, I've had on live shows with me Terry Branson with We Insure Advocates a couple times where we have discussed insurance costs in the area and how it can be significantly more and ways to save on your property. We've also talked about the importance of securing your insurance, especially if it's during hurricane season when you're buying a home, because if a named storm comes and you don't have insurance in place, you're not closing on the property. But with that, there are different types of insurance that we have down here that you may not deal with up where you live currently. First off, you're going to have your regular insurance policy. And with the insurance policy that covers your home, there's going to be a wind and hail segment. You may not have wind and hail, but that's something that's put in place to deal with the hurricanes and the high winds that we can have from some of those storms, especially during the summertime. So one of the things you need to understand is that any of the newer homes that are being built are all designed and constructed so that you don't deal with the problems of wind. County regulations are pretty specific on what needs to be done when the house is being constructed so that you don't have to worry about it. There's going to be a certain number of nails that are going to be put into each 2x4. There's going to be a certain number of steel straps that are used to strap the house down. If you buy a home with, like, say, D.R. Horton or some of the other builders like Chesapeake Homes, they're now doing this system where they take a steel bar, they drill down into your concrete slab, epoxy it, run the steel cable up to the top rafter, and then tighten it down to 1,100 pounds of pressure. What this does is it makes the house very secure, very tight, and very strong. If a hurricane was to come along, it's not going to blow the house off of your foundation. It's not going to make the house twist and fall apart. Instead, what you can expect more than anything for major damage is kind of like the old scene from Wizard of Oz. Y'all ever seen that with Dorothy and Toto in the house and it's spinning along? If that house were to shift just a little bit off the foundation, the entire thing would need to be pulled down to the ground and rebuilt. So they design our homes here to withstand those types of winds. The windows that are used are impact resistant. They're able to take on 100-mile-an-hour winds with no problems. The other type of insurance that you definitely want to take into consideration when buying, and I think it's a good thing to have with any property that you were to purchase, is to look at flood insurance. If your home does not fall into a flood zone, if it falls into flood zone X, you'd be able to pick up a flood insurance policy for a few $100s a year. Now, if you were to be in flood zone AE, which, by the way, is not just you would think along the coast. There are obviously the coast section is going to have flood zone AE, but then there's also segments of the county that is going to be along the rivers and creeks and streams in the waterway where you're also going to be considered flood zone AE and want to carry flood insurance. So you're definitely going to need to take all this into consideration when purchasing a house here. Now, if you're looking at purchasing and you're trying to figure out ways to save on this, one of the biggest things that you can do is buying a new construction home, because one of the biggest factors on determining the cost for insurance per year is the age of your roof. A home that has a newer roof is going to get a significant discount on their annual insurance policy. Also, having new appliances in the house, new things like a new HVAC, a new water heater that isn't going to, just spontaneously bust and put water throughout the house. Those things are also going to help lower your insurance rate for the year. So if you're thinking about making the move, you might want to consider a new construction home, because this is another spot where you can save a lot of money. All right, now this third one is kind of a no-brainer, and if you've ever vacationed here, you know this one very well. But tourist season changes everything here at the beach. Living in Myrtle Beach in January is very, very different than living here in July. In fact, most of the people who live here in the Myrtle Beach area, if they're planning a vacation, usually try to take the big season times when it'd be a highest amount of tourists here, and that's when they plan to go away, because then they can go to other spots across the country, get away from all of the craziness of Myrtle Beach, and have a good time. Living here in January and February is amazing. The weather's usually very mild. You're going to be able to get around town pretty quick and easy. You can get into any and all of the attractions that you would want to. This past weekend, my wife and I took our kids and we went over to Broadway at the beach. In fact, I'll show you a couple clips here of some of the stuff that we saw, but we were able to walk all around Broadway at the beach. People were still out enjoying all of the different things that Broadway has to offer, but the lines were not super long. The ability to get around and do things was super easy, and there was not a lot of stuff in the way. So if you're thinking about moving to the area, this is something you definitely want to take in consideration. Going down to the beach, my wife, she loves to go during the off season. Why? Because she can go get a parking space real easy, walk along the beach, and there's nobody around, nobody bothering her. And the weather's pretty mild, so it's not even really bothering her to be out in the cooler weather. But it's a great time to go and enjoy all of the festivities that Myrtle Beach has to offer. Now, once the summertime comes around, this is going to change instantly. We're going to go to having much more people around. You're going to go to restaurants where the wait going from 10 minutes goes up to an hour and a half. Going to the fun things like pop stroke golf is going to take much longer because it's going to be packed full of people. Going to places like the aquarium, you're not going to be able to see the exhibits as easily because there's going to be a few hundred more people in the aquarium at that time. You can still enjoy it, just know it's going to take a little bit longer to do. So something you want to definitely take into consideration if you're thinking about moving to the area. Tourism does definitely make a big difference in what's happening in the Myrtle Beach area at different times of the year. All right, the next thing that I want to talk about, and this one not a lot of people discuss, but did you know that most of the developments here in the Myrtle Beach area have some sort of a homeowners association? I've discussed this a lot in the past, and the pros and cons of homeowners associations, but to a lot of people, this is something that you need to know before going and purchasing in a property. For sure, you want to make sure if you're buying somewhere that you have an agent that's working on your behalf to get you the documents so you know what to expect when buying into that development. Sometimes the HOA do some really great things. They have a lot of awesome amenities, a community pool, lazy rivers, basketball courts, a clubhouse, weight room, fitness center, all that kind of good stuff that happen right there in the development. And you're getting those for a low monthly fee, but there can also be some restrictions that might make things a little unpleasant for you. A lot of times I get calls from people that want to purchase a property down here and say, oh, well, when I go on vacation, I'm just going to rent my house out. And when I explained to them that the HOA rules and regulations prohibit doing short-term rentals in that development, they get all bent out of shape. In parts of the country right now, you can buy a home. Like I remember visiting my brother-in-law who lives up in the Portland, Oregon area. And when we went there for his wedding, my wife and I, we went on VRBO. We looked around, found several different options for a single-family home for my family to stay in while we were visiting. And it was somebody's house that they live in throughout the week. And then when somebody wants to rent it, they go spend the week with their friends or with family and then come back afterwards. So they were basically having me stay for a couple of days and pay their mortgage for the month. So a lot of people think they're going to move here. They're going to be able to do that same kind of thing. I had a client who bought a home even over inside Myrtle Beach, and they were going to rent out a few of their rooms on weekly rentals on like Airbnb to people. It obviously didn't work out. After a few months, they realized this and they called me wanting to sell the home. In our area, Airbnb and VRBOs do not happen that often. People here are buying the homes, they're living in them. If they want something to be an investment, they're going to buy an investment condo down on the ocean, something that allows weekly rentals, has all the amenities for people that are on vacation that want, and are able to use those instead. So some other things that the HOA is going to prohibit that you may not like. If you want to be able to change the color of your house, you can't always do that quick and easy. You usually have to have a very standardized mailbox. Everyone's looks the same, has the same color post, has the same size mailbox that's black, those types of things. There's also going to be maybe some rules if you want to park on the street. They don't want parking on the street, and if you do, they're going to fine you with it. They're going to regulate some things like the landscape of your yard, that you keep it up and maintain it. If you don't cut your yard for 3-4 weeks, you're more than likely going to get a notification from them saying, hey, do this. Now, you may be saying right now, Jeremy, I ain't buying a house where somebody's going to tell me what I can and can't do. I'm spending good money to buy this property. I want to be able to do with it whatever I can. And I get it. You don't want somebody telling you what you can and can't do. But the reality is that these homeowners associations are put in place so that there is a standardized level for that community that helps protect the overall values of everyone's homes. What I have found is that in developments that do not have a homeowners association here in the Myrtle Beach area, those developments usually do not appreciate in value near as rapidly as those that do have that in place. So it is something to take into consideration. Most of your developments, if there's not the amenities in there, it may be a fee of $40 to $50 a month to cover probably some street lights, maybe the weekly trash pickup type of thing. If you have amenities there like a community pool, probably expect that monthly fee to be around $100 a month. Now, the other big caution that I get a lot of times is, well, Jeremy, then they're going to bring in special assessments and they're going to jack that number up and it's going to go crazy. That doesn't happen here in our area on single family homes. Where that does take place is normally on condominium complexes where today it's here, the next day it's up here. The reason that it rises is not because they're jacking it up just to collect more money. It's usually because insurance rates have increased or there is some sort of big assessment that needs to be taken care of on the building itself. So homeowners associations aren't a big scary animal. Don't let them freak you out. But at the end of the day, know that they are present, and it is something that you could run into for sure. All right, the fifth thing on this list today is that hurricane season is a real threat. It is something that we deal with here in the Myrtle Beach area. Now, historically, Myrtle Beach is an area that has been very fortunate when it comes to hurricanes over the, history of this area. We have had a few major ones that have come through our area and have caused severe damage. The last one that came through that did the most damage was Hurricane Florence, which came through back in 2019. We didn't have a lot of damage back then from wind and hail and tornadoes and those types of things, but where we did have the damage was weeks sometimes after the hurricane came through, where we dealt with flooding. Flooding is something that we definitely deal with. As I mentioned a little while ago, it's something that is present, something we could deal with. We want to take into consideration when thinking of a development and thinking of where we want to purchase a home. Obviously, if we want that property down by the beach, we then need to make sure that the home is constructed properly, meaning it's on either an elevated slab or it's built up on stilts to be able to withstand any flooding that may come through. The same is true on some of the houses over on the waterway. My wife and I have some good friends who are building a home over on the river in Conway. And when I started talking about it, they knew right away they were going to have to build a home that was going to be raised up on stilts that they would be able to pull underneath and park their cars because flooding takes place out there as well. They also know that when we do have those major storms, they may have to take their vehicle, park it up the street a little while and walk down to their home and know that they may get stranded in their house or need to take a boat to get out for a few days after the fact. So as long as you know these precautions ahead of time, you're usually pretty good to go. So what is a hurricane like here in the Myrtle Beach area? Well, let me kind of break it down like this. First off, you don't pay attention to the Weather Channel and the national news. They're looking for headlines to get eyes watching their channels and to their websites and things like that to get all of the views and clicks. Instead, we want to pay attention to our local meteorologists, Ed Piotrowski, Jamie Arnold. Those are the kind of people that we pay attention to. Personally, I'm a big fan of Ed. In fact, here's a picture of me with him. He's a great guy, and he is one that keeps it real. Now, if something's coming, he's going to help you to get prepared for it. He's going to tell you what's coming, but he's also not going to be one with shock and awe to scare you right off the bat. He's going to make it very realistic to you as we get things going. But as it gets closer to that storm, he will give you all the warnings and things that you need to know to prepare. Now, you have to take it into consideration and make your own decisions at the end of the day. If you want to stay put during the storm, that's definitely your thing. You can do that. Nobody can make you leave your home. Just know that if there's an emergency that happens and they put an evacuation in place and you didn't leave, you're not going to get a lot of support from emergency personnel because they can't come out and do that because, well, they're not going to put their lives at risk to come and try to save yours. So just something to kind of keep in mind with it all. So what do? Most of the time we buy the supplies ahead of time. We stock up on water as we get closer to the summer, have it in the garage in bottles and some jugs, and then, keep the freezer full, and we just hang out at the house. If the power goes out, we use the grill to cook outside, and maybe we lose power for a little while, and we just hunker down, play games, hang out, let the storm pass, clean up the yard after it's over, and then go back to living. If you're one of those people, though, that doesn't do well with those things, I would highly recommend packing up, take a trip, go out of town for a couple days, and then you can come back once it's over. But hurricanes is something you definitely want to keep attention to when living and moving into the Myrtle Beach area. All right, the last thing that we want to talk about is the heat here in the summer. Guys, if you're someone who can't deal with heat very well, Myrtle Beach might not be the place for you. Now, one of the things that is a little bit different here than most other parts of the country during summer heat, being close to the coastline, there's usually a little bit of a consistent breeze that takes place, which does make it a little bit more bearable. But while we deal with high heat in our area, the other part that we deal with, which makes it seem a lot worse, is the humidity that comes along with it. I remember good friends that moved here from Texas, and when they came, they said, "Oh, Jeremy, heat, we can deal with that. We did that in Texas all the time. 100 degrees was no big deal." And they came here and were dealing with the temperatures in the mid 80s, but the humidity, and they said, "We can't take this. This is horrible. Oh my gosh, how do you handle this? How do you deal with it?" Well, if you're someone who can't deal with heat, Myrtle Beach might not be the spot for you, but at least one of the things that I can tell you is this. Our homes here are designed to deal with heat. We're used to the air conditioning running about 80% of the year, and that we're running AC most of the time. We're not running the heat because we don't get that extreme cold most of the time. So everything can be done to handle it and take care of it in our area. Know if you go outside, it's going to be hot, it's going to be muggy, but luckily you don't stay out there for a long period of time in the middle of the day. If you need to cut your grass, you go out early in the morning, get it done, or you wait till later in the afternoon, early evening, and handle it then at that point. If you want to go for a workout, same thing. Don't go during the heat of the day. It can be very, very brutal. But these are just a few of the things that you need to pay attention to when you're thinking of moving to the Myrtle Beach area. If there's something that I forgot, put it in the comments down below. Tell me. Let me know what I need to talk about in the next upcoming videos, and we'll discuss those as well. Anyway, guys, if you're thinking about moving to the area and you want to learn more about it, or if I didn't answer your question, do me a favor. Go over to jeremyblanton.com, and there you can book a call with me, and we can discuss your move to the area and what we can do to get things to go smooth and easy and get you transitioned down here to the Myrtle Beach area. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, do me a favor. Give it a thumbs up, get the bell on, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.